Picture a bag. Not a large bag, not an impressive bag. Something you could sling over one shoulder and carry through a narrow medieval street without knocking over market stalls. Leather mostly. Dark brown, going black at the corners where the oil has soaked in over years of use. Buckled shut with two straps that have been repaired so many times, the original stitching is basically archaeological. The seam along the bottom has been restitched at least 3 times in the last decade, each time with slightly different thread. So the base of the bag is now a kind of autobiography of near failures. It weighs about 12 pounds, maybe 14 by the time you've packed everything, and what's inside that bag could mean the difference between life and death. Not your life, someone else's, maybe 2 someone else's, maybe more. This is England, 1523, a market town in the north. York, if you want to be specific. Though it could just as easily be Norwich or Bristol or any of the dozen other towns large enough to support a licensed midwife and small enough that everyone knows who she is and where she lives and how to bang on a door at 2 in the morning when things start going wrong. Let me paint this place for you. York in 1523 has walls. Real stone walls, 30 feet high in places, that go around the whole city like a cincture on a monk's habit. 6,000 people live inside those walls, packed into streets so narrow that the upper stories of the timber-framed houses lean toward each other until they almost meet overhead, blocking out the sky in long, dark stripes. Between the wooden beams, the gaps are filled with wattle and daub, mud and straw and horsehair, essentially. And everything smells of animals, because everyone keeps animals. Pigs in the yard, chickens underfoot, horses in the stable, which is also your house, because in many households your house and your stable share a wall, and the warmth of animal bodies on the other side of that wall is not incidental in November. The River Ouse runs through the middle of the city, cold and brown and thick with everything 6,000 people and their animals throw into it. Tanneries upstream, dyers upstream, slaughterhouses upstream. And downstream, people draw in water for drinking, because the connection between these two facts, upstream poison, downstream water, is understood in a vague general way, without yet being the subject of any organised civic response. Outside the walls, fields stretch out in every direction. The moors to the north, pale and immense and not friendly in bad weather. The vales to the south. The whole of England, grey and green and cold for much of the year, dotted with villages so small they don't appear on maps. And somewhere out there in the night, a woman is in labour. She's been in labour for 16 hours. Her husband, a wool merchant with connections to the staple of Calais, which makes him important in the specific way that 1523 York measures importance, has sent his fastest servant to hammer on the door of the best midwife in the parish. That's your mistress, Goodwife Joan Marsden, and you are her apprentice. Your name is Agnes. Agnes Crowthorpe, if you want the full weight of it, 19 years old. From a village called Thornton-le-Dale, 2 days' walk east of here, where your mother is a farmer's wife who has delivered every baby in the parish for 30 years without ever calling it midwifery or being paid for it in anything except goodwill and occasional chickens. That's where you learned, watching your mother. But watching your mother deliver babies in a stone-flagged farmhouse kitchen and actually doing it yourself, being the one with her hands in the dark, making the decisions, carrying the knowledge and the responsibility in the bag, those are very different things. So here you are, 19 years old, in a city, in the dark, at a table with a single candle reaching for the bag, and I make these sleep histories, and honestly, I'm not sure if you're listening to fall asleep or if some part of you is genuinely fascinated by the fact that 500 years ago, when a woman went into labour, the person who came to help her brought an eagle stone in her pocket and a prayer written on a strip of vellum rolled into a wooden tube to keep it dry. Either way, get comfortable. Here we go. First, you need to understand something about who midwives are in 1523, because it's not what you're probably thinking. You are not a doctor. That is important. You are emphatically, legally, institutionally not a doctor. Doctors are university-educated men. They have Latin. They have Galen and Avicenna. They have elaborate theories about humours, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, and bloodletting and the positions of planets affecting the body's constitution. They wear long robes and charge fees that would make your eyes water, and they do not, as a general professional principle, attend births. That's not entirely their choice. It's partly that childbirth is women's work and has always been women's work, and putting a man in that room would be considered scandalous in ways that people of 1523 would find genuinely difficult to articulate to you, because the assumption is so deep it doesn't fully surface as a belief, it just exists as the obvious shape of things. But it's also that births happen in houses, in beds, in the dark, in the middle of the night, at the mercy of bodies doing what bodies do regardless of theory. And what births need isn't Latin. What births need is experience, knowledge, hands. Midwives have hands. Goodwife Joan Marsden has been delivering babies in this parish for 22 years. She has delivered something close to 400 babies, though she'll tell you approximately 400. With the tone of a woman who stopped counting exactly because the numbers became beside the point. She has seen things that no university education could prepare anyone for. She's lost mothers. She keeps their names in a small book she never shows anyone, a brown calfskin book with the pages thin from use. And she has lost babies, more than she talks about, more than she'll ever talk about. But the ones she's saved, the ones she's pulled through by the skin of their teeth, those she carries with her too. Walking advertisements for what skill and experience and the contents of that 12-pound bag can accomplish. She is licensed by the Bishop of York. That's another thing you need to understand. In England, in 1523, midwives require a bishop's license to practice, not a medical license, not a guild certification, though the surgeons' guilds are beginning to get ideas about jurisdiction. A bishop's license from the church. Because what midwives are primarily trusted to do, beyond the physical work of delivering babies, is administer emergency baptism. If a baby is born dying, if it's clear the child won't survive long enough for a priest to arrive, it falls to the midwife to pour water over the infant's head and say the correct words in the correct order. In the theology of 1523, an unbaptized soul cannot enter heaven. It goes to limbo, or somewhere the theologians disagree about, which is worse in its own way because at least limbo is a settled answer. So the midwife stands between a dying child and eternal damnation. That is not a small thing. The church takes this seriously. They want someone in that room who knows the proper form of words, who won't panic, who won't get them wrong because she's frightened, who will do it right, even, especially, when everything else is going wrong. Hence the bishop's license. Joan has hers framed on the wall of the front room, next to a painting of the Virgin Mary, and a dried sprig of rosemary that's been hanging there so long it's gone grey and brittles to dust if you touch it. The license says, in Latin, that Joan can sort of read, and you definitely cannot, that she is of good moral character, sound understanding, and is licensed to practice the art of midwifery within the bounds of this diocese. It says nothing about what she should put in her bag, that she learned from her own mistress, who learned from hers, who learned from hers, stretching back through generations of women teaching women in a chain of practical knowledge that had nothing to do with university degrees and everything to do with the accumulated wisdom of watching what works and remembering what didn't. You came to York with your mother's recommendation and a letter written in a parish priest's handwriting because you couldn't write your own. Reading and writing being things that girls of your background encountered mostly in church and only partially, and you knocked on Goodwife Marston's door on a Tuesday morning in March of last year. She looked at you for a long time before she said anything. You stood in the doorway with the cold still on your face from the walk, your bundle over, your shoulder, and she looked at you the way she looks at everything, as if she's taking an inventory. Then she said, "Can you keep a secret?" You said yes. Good, because everything that happens in a birthing chamber is a secret. The screaming, the blood, what the woman says when she thinks she's dying, what the husband says when you tell him the news, all of it. If I find out you've been talking, she paused. I'll have your license before you've even earned it. Understood? You understood. That was 14 months ago. Since then you've attended 11 births. 3 of them without Joan's direct help. Just you and the woman and whatever you could remember from everything Joan had ever told you. All 3 went well. 2 healthy babies and 1 that didn't breathe at first but did after you cleared its mouth and rubbed its back and talked to it quietly in the dark, while its mother watched you with eyes that were too exhausted to be afraid anymore. Joan, when you told her about it afterwards, said, "You talked to it?" "Yes." "What did you say?" "I don't remember exactly. Something like, 'Come on then, come on, you're here now.'" A pause. "Good," Joan said. "Tonight is your 12th birth. And Joan is sick, really sick. A fever that came on 2 days ago and hasn't broken. She's in her bed upstairs, sweating through the sheets, her face the specific colour of someone whose body is currently engaged in a fight it might or might not win. She looked at you this afternoon with eyes that knew exactly what this meant. The same eyes she uses when she's assessing a labouring woman for information she doesn't want to deliver. "You'll manage," she said. "Will I?" "Yes." A pause. A cough that went on too long, that rattled in her chest in a way you didn't like. "Take everything, don't leave the bag behind." "I know. The eagle stone." "I know, Joan. The rosemary oil, not the regular oil, the—" "Joan, I know." She looked at you again, that long taking inventory look. "Of course you do," she said, and went back to sleep. So here you are, alone. In the cold front room of Joan's house, by a single candle that gutters whenever the draught finds a gap in the shutter, which is frequently because the shutter is not well fitted and never has been. The light wavers. The shadows of things on the table, the bag, the folded stool, your coat over the chair, jump and settle, jump and settle. The candle smells of tallow, mutton fat rendered. The specific smell of 1523's idea of artificial light. You're packing the bag. Let's talk about the bag. Because the bag is the point. The bag is everything. When you lift it onto your shoulder and walk out the door tonight, you're carrying the entire accumulated knowledge of generations of women who figured out, through trial and error and grief and occasional triumph, what you need to bring when you go to a birth. Some of it will make immediate sense to you right now in your moment, wherever you are. Some of it will seem like superstition. Here is the thing about that distinction. In 1523, the line between medicine and belief is not where you think it is. There is no germ theory. There is no understanding of infection as a discrete physical process with a specific mechanism. The best medical minds in England genuinely believe that illness comes from imbalance of humours, that the position of Jupiter at the moment of your birth affects the constitution of your liver, that a pregnant woman looking at a hair while frightened will leave a birthmark shaped like a hair on her child. Given that framework, an eagle stone rattling in a leather pouch suddenly seems about as rigorously grounded as anything else. So, the bag. You open it on the table, start from the beginning. 6 squares of linen cloth, washed until soft, folded with care. Flat, exact. Joan has a specific way of folding them. Thirds in one direction, thirds in another, that maximizes the surface area available without unfolding the whole. Thing at once. You learned the fold. You do it now without thinking, your fingers making the creases while your mind is 3 steps ahead. Linen, not wool. Wool is too rough, too coarse against skin that is being asked to do extraordinary things tonight. Not cotton. Cotton is expensive and rare in England in 1523, an import luxury, not something you waste on absorbing what a birth produces. Linen, grown in fields, retted in streams, beaten and spun and woven into something that has a specific quality of softness under your fingers, a coolness that turns warm quickly when it contacts skin. You check each square against the candle, looking for holes, for thin places, for any staining that would indicate they weren't washed properly last time. Joan is meticulous about the linens. You're learning to be meticulous about everything. Clean linen matters. You know this not because anyone has explained germ theory to you, but because you have watched Joan and you have watched the births where the linen was clean and the births where it wasn't, and the clean ones end better. The linens go in first, flat against the bottom of the bag. They form a base, 4 of them. Thick tallow, not the thin rush lights the poor burn. When you're working in the dark, and you will be working in the dark, even in a merchant's house with a good fire and iron candle holders, the angles are wrong, and the shadows pull specifically in the places you most need to see. You cannot afford candles that gutter and drown in their own grease. Joan buys from the chandler on Goodramgate, who makes his tallow from a mixture of mutton and beef fat rendered twice. The result burns cleaner and steadier than the single render type. The candles are slightly heavier in the hand, they last longer. You tuck them in along the sides of the bag, wrapped in a strip of cloth to keep them from rubbing against each other and cracking. You don't like the knife. This sounds odd, you realise. You've been at this 14 months. You should be comfortable with it by now. But there is something about this particular knife that always makes your hands pause before they pick it up. It's small. The blade is about 3 inches long, narrow, and ground to an edge that can split a hair. The handle is wrapped in leather so old it's gone nearly black, worn smooth by years of hands, Joan's hands, her mistress's hands before her, and before that hands you can't name. Worn smooth in the specific way that things are worn smooth when they are used regularly and purposefully and with full attention. Joan uses it, used it, you're using it now tonight, to cut the cord. That's it. One purpose. It is very clean and very sharp and used for exactly one thing. And after that thing is done, it is wiped carefully on a linen square and wrapped in leather and put back in the bag, and it will not come out again until the next time it is needed. But you know what it is. You know what it means. You know the weight of its purpose, which is heavier than 3 inches of steel and a handspan of old leather have any right to be. You pick it up. The leather wrap is cold and slightly slick from the damp in the room. You set it carefully in the bag, sheathed, blade down. 2 lengths of waxed linen thread, each about 8 inches, tied into neat loops. Lying in the left outer pocket of the bag where your fingers will find them by touch alone, without looking. The cord needs to be tied in 2 places before it's cut. This is not optional. This is not a suggestion. Leave the cord untied and the baby can bleed out through the stump, and that is not a theoretical risk. It is a thing that has happened, and Joan's face when she described it. The way all the expression left her features, and what was left was something flat and controlled and very old. Told you more than the words did. 2 ties. Always. Before anything else after the birth. You check the loops. The wax is good. The thread strong. You put them in the left outer pocket and close it. Here is where the bag starts to get interesting. 3 small stoppered vials, each one about the size of your thumb, nestled together in a small wooden box with a hinged lid. Joan had the box made by a carpenter on Petergate, and the inside is lined with a strip of leather so the glass doesn't rattle. The whole thing smells, when you open it, of something warm and slightly foreign and very clean. The first vial is olive oil, plain, pale yellow, faintly thick. It comes in wooden casks from the Mediterranean, unloaded at the Hull docks and brought up river, and it is expensive in the way that everything that arrives on a ship from somewhere warm is expensive in a northern English city in the early 16th century. You use it as a lubricant, to ease the passage of the baby's head, to soften skin that is being asked to stretch in ways that are remarkable, that you have watched with a kind of scientific wonder every time, thinking about the architecture of it, the engineering of a body doing this particular thing. The second vial is a blend Joan makes herself, olive oil as the base, with oil of sweet almonds, which is more expensive still, and a few drops of oil of roses, which she buys dried from the apothecary on Stonegate and steeps in olive oil for 3 weeks before using. It smells, when you uncork it, like a church in summer, like something meant for ceremony. This oil is for massage, for the mother's most stretched and stressed skin in the final stages. The massage itself, Joan showed you the technique, slow and deliberate, more pressure than you'd think, does something real. You've seen it prevent tearing, or reduce it. Nothing prevents everything, and you've learned to measure success in degrees, in the difference between bad and worse. The third vial is different, smaller. The stopper is wound with thread to make it tight. It sits slightly apart from the other 2 in the wooden box. Oil of pennyroyal. Pennyroyal has been used by women since before anyone was recording what women used. You find it in Roman medical texts, in Anglo-Saxon herbals, in the margins of monastic manuscripts, noted and renoted by writers who don't always agree on dosage and don't always agree on purpose, but agree on the plant. It grows in the damp corners of English meadows and along stream banks, and it smells sharp and green and slightly medicinal when you crush a leaf. You use it, very sparingly and carefully measured, to stimulate contractions that have grown weak and ineffective. A few drops in hot water, inhaled as steam, or applied to the abdomen in very small quantity. It works. You've seen it work twice. You also know, this is a thing Joan told you very quietly, very early in your apprenticeship, in the front room with the door shut, with the specific look that contained volumes of things she was not saying, that pennyroyal oil taken internally in significant quantity will cause a miscarriage. You know this because women come to Joan's door sometimes, not labouring women, ready to deliver. Different women, women with different problems and different desperation and different stories about what they need and why. Joan does not discuss what she does or doesn't provide in those instances. Neither do you. The wooden box closes with a soft click into the bag middle section, cushioned by the linen squares around it. This is the part of the bag that smells when you open it, like the dried herb bundles hanging from every beam in Joan's kitchen, like something between an apothecary's shop and a summer field. 6 small linen packets, each one sewn shut with rough thread and labelled in Joan's handwriting. You've spent 14 months learning to read Joan's handwriting, which is technically literacy of a very specific kind. You can read Joan's labels perfectly and struggle somewhat with everything else. Shepherd's purse. You pick it up first. Hold it in your palm for a moment. Capsella bursa pastoris. The plant with the small heart-shaped seed pods that grows in every field and every wall crack in England, that farmers walk past every day without noticing. Modest, small, thoroughly unremarkable to look at. But shepherd's purse, boiled into a strong tea and given quickly, is the most powerful thing you carry for stopping bleeding after the birth. Postpartum hemorrhage, the bleeding that doesn't stop, is a leading cause of women dying in childbed. You know this. You know it with the specific weight of things that are both true and terrible and must be faced anyway. When you see the blood coming too fast and too much, you reach for shepherd's purse. You make the tea with hands that must not shake, and you bring it to the woman and you make her drink it, and sometimes it helps enough and sometimes it doesn't help enough and sometimes it isn't shepherd's purse that decides the outcome. It's something beyond what's in your bag. But you carry it. You carry it first. You check it before anything else. You shake the packet. The dried herb rustles against the linen. You check the stitching. Good. Into the bag. Raspberry leaf. Mild. Strengthens the uterus over time. Useful during pregnancy and in the early stages of labour. You boil it into a tea when there's time, when things are going normally and time exists. A hot cup to hold, something warm to drink, the pause of preparing it, creating a moment of care in the room that is itself medicinal in a way you've learned not to dismiss. Mugwort, Artemisia vulgaris. Used to stimulate a labour growing too slow, and used, though Joan is sceptical, to encourage a badly positioned baby to shift. Mugwort doesn't move babies, she told you once with some feeling. Hands move babies. More on that later tonight. Clary sage, strong smell, warm, slightly sweet with a sharpness underneath. You burn a pinch on a coal and let the smoke do something to the air of the room. Something that calms, that changes the quality of breathing, that replaces fear smell with something older and more purposeful. Whether this stimulates contractions physiologically, as some traditions claim, or whether it simply makes the woman breathe more slowly and panic less, the practical outcome seems worth the cost of the herb. You're also aware at a level below theory that you're partly using aromatics to change what the room smells like, to add something intentional to the air over which you have control. Joan has never acknowledged this. Lavender. For the same reason, calm. You've seen grown women, terrified and in pain and certain they're dying, breathe lavender smoke and have their shoulders come down from their ears, have the line between their brows ease just slightly, just enough. Myrrh. This one costs money. Joan is pragmatic about it. She charges slightly more when she uses it, tracked in a small ledger she keeps locked in a box under the floorboards, precise as an accountant about the economics of her practice. Myrrh, resin ground fine and dissolved in wine, is for cleaning wounds after the birth, for any tearing, any cut. Nobody in 1523 understands that it's working because of antimicrobial compounds in the resin. They understand it because they've watched it work. Women who were treated with myrrh after difficult birth surviving, women who weren't sometimes not surviving. And the empirical observation has been recorded and passed down. Medicine often works like this. The mechanism is wrong, but the practice is right. You learn the practice first and the mechanism later, or sometimes you never learn the mechanism at all, but the practice still works. The herb packets go in, nestled together in the centre of the bag. Small stone bottle, half a pint, sealed with a cork dipped in wax to keep it tight. The wax is red and has Joan's thumbprint in it from when she sealed it. Good wine. Not the thin, sour stuff from the taverns on Micklegate. Joan calls this Malvoisie, a rich, sweet wine from somewhere far warmer than England, something that smells, when you uncork it, of fruit and heat and distance. You bring it for two reasons that are both entirely practical. First, the mother. Pain management in 1523 consists primarily of endurance and prayer, supplemented by moderate alcohol, which is not as bleak a combination as it sounds. Fear causes the body to tighten. A tightened body labours harder and more dangerously. Wine reduces fear in a physiological way, not just an emotional one, and fear is therefore genuinely a medical problem that wine genuinely partially addresses. Second, you. Joan told you this without any apology or softening. After a difficult birth, you need to be steady on your feet for the walk home. A mouthful of wine taken when the work is done before you leave the house. One mouthful, not more. Understood. Understood. This is not in the bag. It doesn't fit. It's a separate object, a low wooden stool, 18 inches high with a U-shaped opening cut, into the seat and legs that fold flat for carrying, under one arm going there, under one arm coming back. The birthing stool is one of the oldest pieces of medical equipment in human history. Older than the knife in the bag. Older, probably, than the concept of midwifery as a defined practice. You find birthing stools in ancient Egyptian papyri, in Roman mosaics in the floors of houses where the Romans settled and built and eventually left, in the margins of medieval manuscripts illustrated by monks who were clearly uncomfortable with the subject matter but committed to completeness. The principle is physics. Gravity exists and works downward. A woman sitting upright or leaning forward on a supported surface uses gravity. A woman lying flat on her back fights it. In 1523, this is not universally understood in practice. Some women, wealthy women, following continental fashions, prefer to deliver lying in the bed. There are beds designed for this, specially made with removable sections at the foot. Some physicians who have read recently translated Greek texts are beginning to suggest the bed is more hygienic and controllable. Joan's 400 births disagree. The stool goes under your arm when you leave. If Catherine Berg objects to it, you'll explain. If she still objects, you'll find a compromise. If she insists on lying flat and it causes problems, you'll move her to the stool politely and apologize for the imposition afterward. You check the joints. The folding mechanism is good. It's a matter of 2 wooden pegs and 2 wooden slots, and both pegs are seated firmly. Good. Now here is where things get interesting. It's a strip of parchment, about 18 inches long and 3 inches wide, rolled tightly, tied with red thread, stored in a small wooden tube sealed at both ends with plugs of wax to keep it dry. When you unroll it, you've done this once, carefully under Joan's supervision, your hands slightly unsteady with the sense that you were touching something that mattered in ways you couldn't fully articulate. It's covered in text, Latin mostly, prayers to the Virgin Mary, to St. Margaret, patron saint of women in childbirth, who according to tradition was swallowed by a dragon and burst out of its side unharmed, which is, when you think about it, a story that contains an accurate metaphor for the specific experience it's meant to address. There are also words that aren't exactly prayers, older words that Joan calls charms, with a careful neutral tone, neither approving nor disapproving, neither claiming them as medicine nor dismissing them as nonsense. Words in a form that predates the Church's organisational framework and has simply been absorbed rather than replaced, the way a tree grows around a stone wall, and eventually you can't say where one ends and the other begins. In theory, the Church of England in 1523, still Catholic England, where a decade before the Reformation takes its specific English form, has official positions on the difference between prayers and superstitions. In practice, when a woman has been in labour for 16 hours and the fear in the room has its own weight and texture, you put the prayer girdle around her belly and tie it loosely, and you say the words on it in your best Latin, which is not great Latin, and you pray as well as you know how, because you've used the herbs and the oils and the stool and the massage technique Joan showed you for repositioning. You've done everything knowledge tells you to do, and sometimes there's still only one thing left, the place where what you know runs out and what you believe begins. You roll the girdle back carefully. The parchment resists slightly, it's stiff with age, and you tuck it back into its wooden tube, into the bag, etites. That's the Latin, eagle stone. It's a brown stone, smooth, about the size of a large walnut. When you shake it, something moves inside. A smaller stone, loose in a natural cavity. At the centre of the larger one, a rattle, a stone that contains another stone. The eagle stone gets its name from the claim that eagles carry them in their nests, that the birds are drawn to them and use them as something between a charm and a structural necessity. Whether this is true you couldn't say. You have never observed an eagle's nest at close enough range to check, and the sources that make this claim are not the kind of sources that distinguish between things observed and things that seem true. What you know is that the eagle stone is one of the most continuously documented objects in the history of European medicine. You find it in Roman texts, in medieval herbals, in the letters of queens, actual queens, women with access to everything that wealth and power could provide, asking their apothecaries to source one before an anticipated birth. The theory is sympathetic. The eagle stone contains within itself another stone, a stone giving birth to a stone, like enclosed, calls to like enclosed to open. By placing it near a woman in labour, you encourage the labouring body to follow the same pattern. Release, open, let go. Is it magic? Is it medicine? Is there a meaningful difference in the mind of a woman who has been in labour for 16 hours and needs to believe that the cold weight of a rattling stone pressed against her belly is doing something, is connected to something, is part of a pattern that ends with the thing she needs to happen? You pick up the eagle stone, shake it. The inner stone clicks against the outer one, a clean small sound in the quiet room. Rattle. It goes in the outside pocket of the bag, close, accessible. Joan's notebook, small, bound in calfskin, about 60 pages of which half are covered in Joan's handwriting, which is small and precise and slightly slanted, and which you have been deciphering for 14 months with the focus of a scholar working on a difficult text. You need one specific entry tonight. You flip to it. By memory, the third page from the back, a page you've read 4 times since Joan took sick. K. Berg, first child, good health. Narrow, slightly. Watch for slow progress. Head engaged well at last visit. Strong constitution. Will do well, God willing. Narrow, slightly. You read that twice. Then you close the notebook and tuck it into the inner pocket of your coat against your body. Close. Narrow. Slightly. That means this might be difficult. That means pay attention to the specific thing that might go wrong. That means when the time comes, be ready for it. A small cloth bag tied twice, containing a mixture of dried herbs, lavender, rosemary, and something sharper underneath. Hartshorn, which is ground deer antler, which when it gets damp produces ammonia. Sharp. Eye-watering. Effective. You've used these twice. Both times the woman woke up offended, which you've decided is actually a good sign. A woman who is offended is a woman who has opinions. A woman who has opinions is a woman who is still engaged with her situation. This is the last thing you pack. The strangest thing. You save it for last because it deserves its own moment. It's a smooth bone button, round, about the size of a penny, pierced with 2 holes. Unremarkable. The kind of thing that falls off coats and gets lost under furniture. You use it to test whether a baby is breathing. When a baby arrives and doesn't immediately make the sound, that thin, indignant, perfect sound, one of the first things you do is clear the mouth with your finger, carefully, and then you place this button on the baby's lips, and you watch. Whether breath fogs it, whether the surface changes, whether there's any movement of air at all. It's not in any medical text you've read. It's not in Galen or Avicenna or the herbals on the apothecary's shelf. It's something Joan's mistress taught Joan, who taught you, passed from hand to hand and not written down anywhere, existing purely in the muscle memory of women who understood the necessity and improvised the instrument. But it works. You know it works because of the third birth, the baby that didn't breathe. The button held in the dark, perfectly still, 30 seconds that felt like a different order of time entirely. And then fog. Just barely. Just a thin ghost of condensation on the smooth bone surface. And you rubbed and talked and rubbed some more, and by the time dawn came there was a baby that breathed and cried and ate, and a mother whose face you will carry in your memory for the rest of your life. You put the button in your coat pocket, not in the bag, on your person, accessible, touchable, done. You close the bag, both buckles, lift it once to feel the weight. 12 pounds, 14 with the wine. The weight of everything that 4 generations of women considered necessary for a birth, distilled into a leather bag that smells of oil and herbs and tallow and thyme. You lift it onto your shoulder, pick up the folded stool. The candle in the room gutters and dies. You stand in the dark, which is, you think, entirely appropriate, because you're about to walk into it. The servant who came to fetch you is waiting in the street outside. His name is Thomas, he told you when he banged on the door, and he has the look of a man who has been awake since yesterday and is being held upright by cold air and anxiety. He's holding a lantern, small, horn-sided, with a tallow candle inside that has burned down to a half-inch stub and is guttering whenever the wind looks at it wrong. She's been at it since yesterday morning, he says. I know. We'll walk quickly. Can you... He stops, starts again. Master Berg wanted me to ask if you've attended a birth before. You look at him. Yes, you say, because the good wife Marsden usually. Master Berg's wife needs a midwife. I am a midwife. I have attended 11 births. I know what I'm doing. Now let's walk. He blinks, then nods, sets off. The streets of York at 2 in the morning are a different world from the streets at noon. Same streets, same cobblestones, same buildings leaning overhead. But darkness does something specific to a place, strips away its navigational vocabulary, removes the signs and colours and the constant human movement that makes a daytime street readable, leaves you with the bare bones of it. Thomas's lantern is a circle of orange light about 3 feet in diameter. The rest of the world is walls and cobbles and the sound of your own feet. The cold is particular, not biting. It's May, the kind of May that hasn't warmed up yet, but has at least stopped being April, but present in a sustained way that seeps through your coat and settles in your shoulders and the back of your neck. Your breath makes small white ghosts in front of you. The smell of the night city is different from the day smell. During the day, the noise and movement of commerce creates its own olfactory foreground. Fires burning, cooking, animals working, the warm, aggressive smell of people and industry. At night, what the air carries is what's underneath all that. Mud. The streets are part cobbled, part packed earth, part whatever has been walked into them over decades, and the mud has a specific quality at night, a cold mineral smell that's different from the warm animal smell of mud in sunlight. Pigs. People keep pigs even in the city. They roam the streets eating garbage, and they are, in a strange practical sense, one of the primary sanitation systems in a city of 6,000 people. And you've been here long enough to stop noticing the smell in daylight, but at night it's more present. Warm and organic and not unpleasant if you grew up on a farm, which you did. And the river. York sits at the confluence of 2 rivers, and at night the river smell comes up through the streets on the cold air. Dark water and silt and the particular damp presence of something enormous and indifferent, moving through the centre of everything without any particular opinion about what's happening on its banks. Thomas leads you through streets, down Goodram Gate, left into Petergate, and there at the end of Petergate, rising above everything else, York Minster. At night, in the dark, it is something different from what it is in daylight. In daylight it is magnificent. At night it is present in a way that precedes the word magnificent, in a way that the body registers before the mind has found language for it. 500 years of accumulated stonework, completed in 1472 after 2.5 centuries of construction, the largest medieval cathedral in the north of England, its towers visible from miles, its shadow at noon falling across streets that were built around the fact of its shadow. You know from climbing it once, Joan told you to on your 2nd week in the city, go up, learn the view, memorise it, you'll navigate by it in the dark. That from the top you can see 20 miles to the moors north and the vales south, and the whole of the city spread beneath you like a map made real. You memorise the view. Now you navigate. Past the Minster and south along Stonegate, where the stationers have their shops shuttered and dark, into a street that narrows and smells of wool, that specific greasy warm smell of raw fleece, of the sheep whose backs it came from, of the trade that built this city's wealth over the previous 2 centuries. Thomas stops at a door, substantial, oak, iron-banded, a stone arch around it that was not cheap when it was built. He knocks 3 times. The door opens immediately, which tells you someone has been standing behind it. The woman who opens the door is about 35, sturdy, red-faced in the way of someone who has been by a fire all night, breathing slightly fast. housekeeper. Her name is Nell. Thank God, she says. Then she sees your age, and her expression does the thing people's expressions do when you're 19 and carrying a midwife's bag. Where is good wife Marsden? Ill. I'm her apprentice, Agnes Crowthorpe. I've been trained by her for 14 months. I've attended 11 births, all successful. I know what I'm doing. You say it without defensiveness, factually, the way Joan would say it. Nell looks at you for 3 long seconds, then, come in. The house smells of beeswax candles. Expensive, not tallow, the kind that the wealthy burn so their rooms don't smell of rendered mutton fat. And the residue of the day's cooking, and underneath both of those something you recognise immediately. Fear, not your fear. The ambient fear of a house where something is happening that might go wrong, the specific register of it, which is recognisable the way you'd recognise the smell of smoke before you saw a fire. Nell leads you through a hall, flagged floors, good oak panelling on the lower walls, a painting of something religious at the end. Up a staircase with treads that creak on the left side toward a door from behind which you can hear. Sound, low, rhythmic. Somewhere between a moan and a chant, a woman's voice doing the specific thing that women's voices do when they've been in pain for a long time, and have found, through necessity, a way to breathe through it that keeps them tethered to themselves. You've heard this sound 11 times. It is, every time, the most serious sound you know. The sound of a person applying everything they have to endurance and not stopping. Nell opens the door. The room is warm, which is right. Someone has been feeding the fire and the room holds the heat. The shutters closed and covered with wool hangings. Candles in 2 iron holders. The smell hits you immediately. Fire smoke, the slightly sharp smell of fresh sweat. The herb smell of something that's been burned on the coals. Sage, someone has been using sage. And underneath everything, the warm specific smell of a birth room that has been a birth room for several hours. 3 women are already present. The first is sitting with the labouring woman, holding her hands, speaking quietly. This is the gossip. Not gossip in the modern sense, but from the original word God-sib, meaning God-parent, meaning the women who have been invited to be present. This gossip is the labouring woman's younger sister, Margaret. Plain wool dress, dark hair, hands that grip her sister's hands with the focus of someone who has decided that this is the most important job in the world and intends to do it perfectly. The second is older, Dame Alice, heavy-set, standing by the fire with her arms crossed. She looks at you when you come in, and you look at her, and a complicated conversation happens in about 3 seconds. You're young. I have 40 years on you, but you have the bishop's license and I don't, and we both know that, and we're going to work together tonight because we don't have any other choice, so let's decide now not to waste time on the hierarchy. You give her a small nod. She gives you something that might, eventually, become a nod back. And the third person is Catherine Berg. She's not in the bed. Someone had sensible instincts about that. But in a large oak chair that has been padded with cushions and positioned upright. She's 23 from Joan's notes. Pale with exhaustion. The kind of pale that isn't dangerous yet, but is informational. It tells you what 16 hours of labour does to a body that started the process with good reserves. Her hair is loose, traditional. The loosening of all knots in the birth room, a practice that runs back further than any specific tradition can trace. Practical and symbolic at once. No bindings, nothing tied, everything open to opening. She's in the middle of a contraction. You can see it move through her body. the tightening that starts deep and radiates outward, her hands gripping the arms of the chair, her face going elsewhere, into that specific territory that is not quite here and not quite anywhere else, the place that labour takes. Women, whether they want to go there or not. You don't introduce yourself, you set down the bag, set down the stool, take off your coat, and you wait. The contraction peaks. You can see the peak in the quality of her stillness, the absolute focused effort of it. Then slowly, slowly, the tide goes out. Catherine comes back, opens her eyes, looks at you. Where is Goodwife Marsden? Same question, asked differently. Not with Nell's anxiety, but with a careful, flat voice of someone who needs information and has learned to need information efficiently. She's ill. I'm her apprentice, Agnes Crowthorpe. 14 months of training, 11 births. Pause. I know what she would do, and I'll do it. Will you work with me? Catherine looks at you, at the bag, at your hands which are at your sides, entirely still. You decided they would be still before you knocked on Joan's door, because Joan told you early on that a midwife's hands must look like they know what they're doing even when the midwife's head is 3 seconds behind. 11 births, Catherine says, all healthy, all live mothers. A pause. She looks at the stool. All right, she says, let's get this done. Good woman, the first thing you do is wash your hands. This is not the 1523 standard of care. The 1523 standard of care does not have a strong position on hand washing before internal examinations. Some midwives do it, many don't. Joan does, every time. She does it from a specific mixture of water and wine vinegar kept in a small flask in the inner pocket of the bag. She told you to do it too, not with any explanation of mechanism, but with this. Clean hands show respect, and they work better. You ask Nell for hot water. It arrives in a basin, real heat, properly heated by the fire, which means someone has been keeping the fire going with intention. You wash. Between the fingers, under the nails, up to the wrists. The vinegar stings the small cracks in the skin of your knuckles that appear every spring, when the air is still cold and your hands are in water constantly. The warm water feels extraordinary on fingers that have been cold since you left Joan's house. You dry on a clean linen square from the bag. White, very clean. Then you sit on a stool beside Catherine's chair and you talk to her. This is also medicine. Tell me what's been happening, you say, since it started. She tells you. Methodically, more methodically than you'd expect from someone 16 hours into labour, which tells you something about her. She's the kind of person who stays organised when things are hard. Waters broke yesterday mid-morning. Contractions started 2 hours after that, strong and regular, encouraging. And then, around 6 hours in, they slowed down, she says. The pains are still coming, but they're not. She stops, starts again. They're not doing anything. I can feel them, but they're not pushing. Do you understand? You understand. You've seen this once before. A labour that stalls. The contractions continue, but something upstream of the contractions isn't progressing. The cervix stops opening. The baby stops descending. Could be position. Could be the pelvis. Joan's note. Narrow, slightly. Could be exhaustion, making the contractions themselves less effective. Could be the baby's position, preventing the head from applying the pressure that tells the cervix to open. You need more information. May I examine you? You ask. Catherine nods. Margaret tightens her grip on her sister's hands. You warm the almond oil between your palms. You can feel the heat of it through the glass. and you conduct the examination with everything Joan taught you, which is primarily this. Be quick, be thorough, be gentle, and remember that your fingers are reading a language that you've been learning for 14 months and that you'll be learning for the rest of your practice. 2 minutes. You sit back. Catherine is watching your face. She's good at this. You can see her reading you, looking for what your expression tells her about what your hands found. You give her what you can. You've made good progress overall, you say. The baby's head down, that's correct, but the head is tilted slightly. You show her with your hand a small tilt. Not backward, not breech, just not quite aligned. And the cervix has stopped opening because of it, because the pressure isn't even. What do? We move you into positions that might encourage the baby to shift. And I'm going to use some things from the bag, and we're going to use our hands. You glance at Dame Alice. All of us. What you don't say out loud, what you're processing in the part of your mind that runs in parallel with speech. The pelvis. Narrow slightly. You felt it. Not dangerously narrow. Probably not dangerously narrow. The baby's head is normal size. There is room. But there is not extra room. There is no margin. There is precisely enough room if the baby's position is exactly right. And right now the baby's position is not exactly right. And the difference between these two things, precisely enough and not quite right, is the difference between a difficult night and a catastrophic one. You don't say this. You say, let's start with movement. You give Margaret the clary sage packet, a small iron dish from the hearthside, a pinch on a coal. When it catches, hold it near the chair. The sage sizzles. Smoke rises. Thin, aromatic, warm. The smell changes the room slightly, adds something intentional to the air, something that has nothing to do with fear or effort and everything to do with purpose. The raspberry leaf tea brews in a small pot. You bring it to Catherine in a cup, and she holds it with both hands, the warmth of the cup against her palms, the steam rising to her face, and drinks it slowly. Does it help? She asks. Yes, you say, and you mean it, though not entirely in the way she might think. The tea helps. The warmth of the cup helps. The act of being brought something, of being cared for in a small specific way in the middle of an experience that has been entirely about endurance, that helps too. Then you begin to move her. Stand up. Yes, I'll help. Hold Margaret's arm. Now lean forward, hands on the wall. Yes, like that. Let your weight go forward. Catherine complies. She's exhausted, but she's trying, which is everything. You move her through positions that Joan has been teaching you for a year, leaning forward, swaying, walking slowly along the length of the room. The birthing stool, you've moved it into position for sitting and rocking. The specific stance where you stand behind her and apply counter pressure on her sacrum when a contraction comes, your palm flat against the base of her spine, pressing firmly, steadily in the direction that creates space. The first time you do this, Catherine makes a sound that is different from the sounds she's been making. Not worse, different, surprised. That, she says. I know. Don't stop. You don't stop. Dame Alice crosses the room after about 15 minutes and takes a position without asking permission. She places her hands on Catherine's hips and applies pressure in a different direction. Outward, a specific rocking motion synchronized with the contractions. You watch her hands with full attention, learn the angle, learn the timing, incorporate. An hour passes, you check again. The baby has moved, measurably. Not all the way, not to the ideal position yet, but the tilt has reduced. The pressure is more even. This cervix has opened by the amount it hadn't opened in the previous 6 hours. It's working, you tell Catherine. She doesn't answer. She's in that place past conversation. But her hand, where it's braced against the wall, unclenches slightly. Just slightly. Around 3 in the morning, Thomas has appeared at the door twice and been waved away both times by Nell, with the efficiency of a woman who has decided that her job is to manage the boundary between this room and the world outside it. You reach into the outside pocket of the bag. The eagle stone is cold in your hand, smooth. The weight of it is specific and satisfying, the way stones are satisfying to hold. You warm it between your palms, rub it back and forth, feel the inner stone shift with the motion, its rattle muffled by your hands, until it's the temperature of your skin. Catherine's eyes are open. She's in the chair again, a rest between positions. You hold the eagle stone out to her. She looks at it. What is it? It's called an eagle stone. You feel the smaller stone inside. You place it in her hands, close her fingers around it. She shakes it experimentally, and the inner stone rattles, that clean, small, specific sound. A stone inside a stone, you say. It's old. Older than most of what's in the bag. The idea is that, like calls to like, a stone that's ready to release what it's holding. A pause. Your body knows how to do this. Everything is correct. Sometimes knowing something in your mind and knowing it here, you touch briefly your own sternum, takes time to align. Catherine looks at the stone in her hands, then up at you. That's not medicine, she says, not accusingly, observationally. No, you agree. It's something else, but it's not nothing. She holds the eagle stone through the next 3 contractions, does not put it down for the next 2 hours. Later, you'll tell Joan about this moment, and Joan will nod with that expression that has layers you can't fully map. It's not nothing, she'll say, which is exactly what you said. An hour later, close to 4 in the morning, Catherine stops walking and looks at you with eyes that have gone past fear into something quieter and more dangerous. The specific look of a body that has been working for 17 hours and is beginning to run a genuine accounting of what's left. I'm so tired, she says. I know. I don't think I can. You can. Agnes. Her voice drops to something that is almost a whisper. Is the baby? The baby is fine. I can feel movement. You've been checking the heartbeat through your palm, flat against the side of her abdomen, the rhythmic press and release that tells you the baby is alive and working. The heartbeat is strong. Catherine closes her eyes, opens them. What else is in the bag? You reach for the wooden tube, uncap it. The prayer girdle unrolls slowly, slightly resistant, the parchment stiff with age. This is a birth prayer, you say. It's been at births in this parish for a long time. You say the words, the Latin by memory, learned phonetically, the sounds of them careful and precise, even without full comprehension, and the English phrases Joan translated for you. The Virgin's intercession, St. Margaret emerging from the dragon, the pattern of opening, the pattern of release. You tie it loosely around Catherine's waist, over her shift. The parchment is cool against your fingers as you knot the red thread. Margaret, on the other side of the chair, crosses herself. Her lips move. Dame Alice doesn't cross herself, but her mouth is moving very quietly, something private. Catherine leans her head back against the chair and breathes. And in the space of the next 2 contractions, something changes. You can feel it in the room before you can feel it in Catherine's body. A quality of air, a change in the effort. The way the sound she makes shifts from the sound of pushing against resistance to the sound of working with something rather than against it. Whether it is the prayer, whether it is that after 17 hours the baby finally found the last fraction of rotation it needed, whether it is the accumulated physical work of this entire night finally bearing fruit at its natural time, the mechanism is less important than the fact. Something changes, you check, move quickly, say, "Catherine, the stool, now." "I need, now, please." The next part is where I'll be honest with you about what I'm going to tell you and what I'm not. I'm going to tell you what it feels like to be in that room. I'm not going to be graphic, because this is a sleep podcast and because the physical reality of birth doesn't require explicit description to be understood. It requires presence, and you have that if you let yourself be in the room with Agnes. So, Catherine moves to the stool at 4:17 in the morning. The room is hot and smells of herbs and effort and the specific animal smell of a body at maximum exertion. The candles have been replaced twice. The fire is high. Dame Alice is on one side, Margaret on the other, and Agnes is in front, kneeling on the stone floor. She'll feel this in her knees for days, the cold coming up through the flags, with her hands positioned and her whole self committed to this. There is always, in a birth, a moment where everything that's been preparing converges. Hours of work, physical and emotional and technical and intuitive, gathering into a specific second where the decisions are made in the time it takes to decide, without any gap between knowledge and action. That moment comes. Agnes's hands know what to do. She feels it. The shoulder. The specific resistance that Joan's note had prepared her for. Narrow. Slightly. Here it is. Exactly here. And she acts. The angle. The specific degree of adjustment. Learned in theory. Practiced on Joan's demonstrations. Felt now in reality. Which is different from both and is what it is. The shoulder clears. The baby comes. Into Agnes's hands. Her hands are shaking. Joan told her this would happen. She told her it happens every time, for years, until the body stops categorizing birth as an emergency and starts processing it simply as work. She told her the most important thing is to let your hands shake while they do the necessary things, because the shaking is physiological, and the things are what matter. 2 ties, left outer pocket. She finds them by touch. This is why they're in the left outer pocket. This is why she practiced until the location was automatic, and ties them without looking, because she's looking at the baby. Linen thread, 2 knots, firm. The specific knot Joan showed her 50 times on a piece of rope before she let Agnes anywhere near a real cord. The knife, 3 inches, cold leather handle. She cuts between the ties and the knife is sharp. She knows it's sharp. She checked it before she packed it. And it's done cleanly. The baby is wrapped in the first linen square before Agnes fully registers that she's wrapping it. Her hands moving through a sequence her body has learned. The sound, thin, high, indignant, like a complaint about conditions. Margaret makes a sound that is a laugh and a sob happening simultaneously. Agnes wipes the baby's face with a corner of the linen and reaches for the button. Automatic. It's in her pocket. She puts it there specifically for this and presses it to the baby's lips. Fog. Immediate. Clear. Definitive. This baby is breathing. Agnes hands the baby to Catherine. "A girl," she says. Her voice is steady. Remarkable, she thinks distantly, that your voice can be steady. Catherine receives her daughter, and her face does the thing that faces do in that moment. The thing that Agnes has seen 11 times before, and that is never the same twice. and is always the same once. Agnes turns back to the work that remains, the afterbirth, the examination, the shepherd's purse tea, made quickly, the dried herb into hot water, strong, ready by the time it's needed, the bleeding, which she watches for 10 minutes with the specific focused attention of someone who knows what too much looks like and is counting seconds between checks. The bleeding is within bounds. Agnes breathes. Nell, from her corner where she's been so still for so long, says quietly, "What do you need?" "More hot water, clean linen for the baby," and Agnes hesitates. "Go wake master. Berg, tell him he has a daughter." The sky outside is grey by the time it's done, not light yet. English. May morning comes reluctantly, the sky going through several phases of less dark before it commits to anything that could be called light. But the birds have started, which means somewhere out there the world has decided that night is functionally over. You've cleaned and assessed and wrapped and settled. Catherine is in the bed now. The bed is right for after, for rest, for the specific exhaustion that comes after everything is done, with the cushions arranged the way she needs them. Her daughter is washed and wrapped, which is a thing Dame Alice handled with the focused speed of 40 years of practice, her hands doing the work with the efficiency of complete familiarity. Agnes drank one mouthful of the Malvoisie, Joan's instruction. Her hands have stopped shaking. Master Berg appeared at the door, large man, red-eyed, the look of someone who has spent the night in the specific terror of waiting, and he stood in the doorway and looked at his wife and daughter with an expression that needs no translation across 500 years. He gave Agnes money, more than the fee she'd have named. She put it in her coat pocket without counting it. Now she's repacking the bag, systematic, thorough, every item in its place. The used linen squares folded together separately to be washed when she gets home. The clean ones, the oil vials checked. The almond oil is mostly gone. She used it more than she expected. She'll need to ask Joan about replenishing. The penny royal is untouched. The olive oil low, the herb packets, shepherd's purse almost empty. Clary sage half gone. Raspberry leaf used. She makes a mental note of everything. The cord ties, the spare ones, unused. She keeps them. The knife, wiped on a clean corner of linen, wrapped, in the bag. The prayer girdle she unties carefully from Catherine's waist when Catherine moves to the bed. Rolled back into its tube. The eagle stone. She starts to reach for it and Catherine speaks. "May I keep it?" Catherine says. "For a little while." Agnes looks at her. Catherine's face in the grey morning light coming through the edge of the shutter is the face of someone who has just come through something enormous and is not yet sure what shape she is on the other side of it. "Bring it back when you're well," Agnes says. "Joan will need it." Catherine nods, closes her fingers around the stone. The bag closes, the buckles fasten. Agnes stands. Her back has an opinion about the past several hours. She'll be feeling the position she held during those final minutes for days. Her knees from the stone floor. Her hands have that deep, quiet ache of hands that have been used for precise work for a long time. Dame Alice, gathering her own things, pauses at the door. "You did well," she says. "That's all." Agnes knows, from the economy of it, from the weight in those 3 words from a woman who has 40 years and does not say things she doesn't mean, that this is significant. "Thank you," Agnes says. "The hip pressure technique. I'd like to understand it better." Dame Alice almost smiles. "You'll understand it better every time you use it. That's how it works." A pause. "Pass it on." She leaves. Agnes says goodbye to Catherine, who is almost asleep with her daughter on her chest, to Margaret, who is sitting in the chair by the bed with the boneless exhaustion of someone who held someone else up through something enormous and is only now discovering what it cost her. She picks up the bag, the stool, down the stairs, the creaking tread on the left. Nell hands her a wrapped package at the door, bread and cold meat, food for the walk, without being asked and without comment. The gesture of a person who has run a household long enough to know what a person needs without needing to be told. Out the front door, into the morning, May morning in York. The sky's doing that thing where it goes from dark blue to pale grey without fully committing to either. The air is cold on Agnes's face after the heat of the room she's been in for hours, and clean, or clean relative to a city of 6,000 people and their animals, which is a matter of perspective. The streets are beginning, not fully awake, no market stalls yet, no carts of goods, no vendors, but people moving, servants from the big houses, a baker carrying something that smells extraordinary, a man with the purposeful walk of someone who has somewhere important to be at an hour when other people don't. Agnes walks south, through the narrowing streets, past the Church of Holy Trinity where the gravestones lean at angles that suggest the ground has opinions, into Petergate, and there, at the end of Petergate, in the first pale light of the morning, the Minster. In daylight it is magnificent, which is the word that comes most readily and is also insufficient. At this hour, in this light, the sky barely grey, the stone of the towers absorbing the paleness of the east, the enormous windows holding the last of the night in their depths, it does something different. It is present in a way that precedes magnificence, in a way the body registers before the mind has words. Agnes stops, just for a moment, the bag on her shoulder, the stool under her arm, her breath making small ghosts in the cold air. 250 years of building, finished in 1472, 50 years ago. Men alive in this city watched the last stones go in. The men who put them there were old men when she was born. The men who taught the men who taught the men who put the stones there could have stood on this street and watched it happen. It's that recent, that real. She keeps walking. The house is quiet when Agnes lets herself in, fire banked low, the front room dim and smelling of herbs and tallow, and the specific old house smell of somewhere that has been lived in by the same person for decades. She hangs her coat, sets the bag on the table, the stool against the wall. Then she goes upstairs. Joan is awake, or the sound on the stairs woke her. Agnes has never managed to be quiet on these stairs in 14 months. The second tread from the top makes a sound regardless. She's sitting up in bed, thinner than she should be from the fever. Her face the colour of someone still fighting something. But her eyes, when she looks at Agnes, are entirely themselves. "All right," Joan says, "all right. Tell me." So Agnes tells her, all of it. The stalled labour, the position, the back labour technique. Dame Alice showed me something for the hips I want to show you. The eagle stone, the prayer girdle, the shoulder, the cord ties, the button she didn't need to use but had in her pocket. Joan listens, asks precise questions, not interrupting, refining, making sure Agnes understands not just what she did but why, the difference between action and understanding, between performing a technique and owning it. When Agnes reaches the shoulder, Joan says, "What did you feel?" Agnes describes it. Her hands remember it. She makes the gesture in the air, the specific angle, the motion. Joan watches Agnes's hands. "Yes," she says quietly, "that's exactly it." A long pause. "I taught you that," Joan says. "You did." Joan lies back. Something that might, if you caught the right angle, be called satisfaction crosses her face before it settles back into its usual careful neutrality. "The money from Master Berg, 2/3 in the box, 1/3 is yours. Joan, you did the work. You take the share." Another pause. "You did well. The mother is well. The baby is alive. That is the work. Now get some sleep. There'll be another call by tonight." She closes her eyes. There's nothing to say after that, so Agnes doesn't say anything. She goes upstairs, under the roof, straw mattress, wool blanket, a wooden box for her things. The small east-facing window is showing her the sky arriving, pale, grey, the specific non-colour of English May morning before it makes up its mind. She sits on the edge of the mattress and takes off her shoes. Her feet are cold. They've been cold since she left this house 3 hours ago, and the shoes are not thick-soled enough to prevent cold from coming upward through cobblestones. She flexes her toes, pins and needles of returning warmth. Her back aches, specifically, in the place between the shoulder blades and slightly lower, from the hours of bending and pressing and holding herself in positions that a human body can sustain but that a human body notices. Her knees have opinions from the stone floor. Her hands, she holds them out in front of her, flat, still. They're not shaking anymore. The button is in her coat pocket downstairs. She'll clean it tomorrow. Clean it and dry it and put it back in the left outer pocket where it lives when it's not needed. The bag is on the table below. Tomorrow she'll unpack it properly, wash the linens, assess the stocks, replenish what's been used. Shepherd's purse almost out. Olive oil low. Clary sage half gone. Tomorrow. She lies down. Pulls the blanket up. The wool is scratchy against her chin. It has been scratchy every night for 14 months, and she's not found a way to prevent this. She doesn't mind it anymore. The birds are beginning outside. Starlings first, always starlings, filling the morning with their chaotic, overlapping voices. Then a crow from somewhere near the minster. Then the general ambient bird sound of a city waking up, which is different from the general ambient bird sound of a village waking up, which is different again from the sound of no birds at all, which is the sound of nothing awake. York is waking up, without her, for a little while, for just these hours. I want to come back to the bag, for a moment. Not the objects this time, not the linens and oils and the knife with its handspan of worn leather. Not the prayer girdle or the eagle stone or the bone, button that fogs, the bag itself. 12 pounds of things that women figured out across centuries through the specific method of doing things and watching what happened and remembering and teaching. No laboratories, no controlled trials, no journals publishing peer-reviewed results. Just, this happened, and then this happened, and we did this, and it worked, and we told the next person, and she told the next person, in a chain that stretches back so far, the beginning of it is before the records that would have recorded it. Some of what they passed down was wrong. The miasma theory, some of the herbal combinations that didn't do what they were supposed to do, the humoral explanations for why certain things worked. Some of it was right for reasons nobody understood yet. The hand-washing, the positions, the forward lean, the shepherd's purse. And some of it belongs to a different category entirely. The category that doesn't have a clean name. The eagle stone, the prayer girdle, the things carried not because they can be proven to affect physiology, but because they affect the person holding them, the person in the room, the person who needs to believe that there is a pattern, and that she is part of it, and that the crisis will resolve. That category doesn't have a clean name because the line between belief and medicine is not as clean as we'd like it to be. A woman who believes she can do something is physiologically different from a woman who believes she can't. Fear contracts, confidence opens. The body listens to the mind in ways the medicine of any century is still mapping. The eagle stone is something to hold. That's not nothing. The prayer girdle is words said in the dark when you've done everything else. That's not nothing either. The bag holds all of it, the proven and the believed, the herb packets and the holy text, the knife and the cord ties and the bone button and the stone that rattles. All of it carried by a 19-year-old girl through the dark streets of a medieval city on a night when she was, in the most literal possible sense, the only thing standing between two lives and whatever might have happened otherwise. £12, maybe 14 with the wine. Agnes Crowthorpe, lying in the attic room, in the morning light that is finally arriving with some commitment. She can feel it warm on her feet through the blanket, is not the person who knocked on Joan's door in March of last year. The person who knocked on Joan's door was a girl from a village 2 days' walk away. She knew some things her mother had shown her. She was quiet in the way of people who haven't yet learned what they know. The person in this bed has handled 12 births, has made decisions in 2 seconds that could not be revised, has felt the specific shift of a malpresented baby under her hands and done the correct thing about it, has stood in the dark with a bone button on a baby's lips counting seconds, has looked at a woman in labour and known, not guessed, known, what the notebook said and what her own hands had found and what the problem was and what the solution was and done the solution. This person knows things. Not all things. Not even most things. There are years of practice ahead, of births she hasn't attended and complications she hasn't seen and techniques she doesn't know yet that Dame Alice and other women in other houses carry in their hands. But she knows the contents of the bag. She knows why each item is there. Not just how to use it, why, what it addresses, what it replaces, what gap in human knowledge or human capability it fills. The knife fills the gap between before separated and after separated. The shepherd's purse fills the gap between bleeding too much and not bleeding too much. The eagle stone fills the gap between knowing what to do and being able to do it. They're all medicine, every one of them. 4 more years of apprenticeship, then the bishop's examination. Joan has already said she'll pass, with the specific certainty of someone who is not inclined toward reassurance as a general practice, and is therefore being accurate rather than kind. Then her own practice, her own license on her own wall, her own bag worn at the corners, her own notebook in her own handwriting, with entries like narrow, slightly, watch for slow progress. Her own apprentice some day, a girl from somewhere, with her mother's letter in her hand, standing at a door. Who will she teach? The cord ties on a piece of rope 50 times until the hands know them in the dark. The cleaning of the knife, the specific fold of the linen squares, the oil of pennyroyal and what it means and when to use it and what else it means, said quietly with the door shut. The eagle stone, how to warm it, when to give it. The way to say it's not nothing without making it into more than it is or less than it is. The button, put it here. Watch, count seconds. The knowledge passing forward, hand to hand, from woman to woman, in a chain that has been going for as long as there have been women in labour and other women present to help. In 500 years, which is from Agnes's morning to your night exactly, that chain will still be unbroken. The form will have changed. The hospital, the medical school, the obstetric textbook, the gloved hands, the monitors showing the baby's heartbeat as a wave on a screen. But someone will still be in a room with a woman who needs help. Someone will still be making decisions in 2 seconds. Someone will still be doing the specific work of being present at the threshold of life and bringing everything they know to bear on the question of whether it goes well. That thread doesn't break. The morning birds are loud now. They've committed to it. Agnes closes her eyes. The room holds the warmth of being a room that has been slept in all night. A specific accumulated warmth from a body in a blanket, from the chimney stack that goes through the corner of the room, carrying heat from the fire below. She can feel it against her face. Her breathing has slowed. She can feel that too if she pays attention, which she stops doing, which is the thing. The bag is on the table downstairs, the oils in their wooden box, the herb packets in their careful order, the cord ties in the left outer pocket, the knife in its leather wrap, the prayer girdle in its tube, the smelling salts tied twice, the candles in their cloth. The eagle stone is not in the bag tonight. It's in Catherine Berg's hand across the city, somewhere in a house that smells of beeswax, candles and wool, and a new morning. It will come back. Tools come back. They find their way to the people who can use them, passed along in the chain of teaching, from hand to hand through the years, worn smooth in the specific way of things that are used with full attention and purpose. Her hands, heavy now, the way hands get when they've been asked for everything and now are being asked for nothing, and the contrast has a physical weight. Her feet, warm at last, her back still registering its hours. Tomorrow, she thinks. I'll feel it more tomorrow. Right now, the exhaustion is too complete for specific complaints. The birds, the minster bells somewhere, striking an hour she doesn't try to count. The cart on the cobbles below, beginning the day's business. The distant voice of someone calling something to someone else, something entirely ordinary. The texture of a city morning. Warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. She has work that matters and hands that know what to do with it, and a mistress who said you did well without softening or decoration, which from Joan is the best thing you can be told. That's more than a lot of people have. Centuries will pass. The walls around York will still stand. They'll be preserved, walked upon by tourists 500 years from now, managed carefully against the very specific threat of too many people who find them scenic. The minster will still stand, the same minster, the same stone, the same towers visible from 20 miles on a clear day. A thing that was already old when Agnes walked past it this morning will be older still, incomprehensibly older. The same way that things which are already very old don't get incrementally older, they simply become their own category. The streets will change shape. The timber-framed houses will mostly go. Fire, mostly, in a century and a half. The mud streets will get cobbled and then paved and then repaved with materials that no one in 1523 had a concept for. The river will be managed, controlled, its floods anticipated and partially reduced by engineering that would be indistinguishable from magic to anyone in this century. The tanneries will move. The pigs will eventually stop roaming the streets. The smell of the city will change, not vanish, never vanish. Cities smell like they're humans and their work regardless of era. But change into something that Agnes wouldn't recognise, just as Agnes's York would be unrecognisable in its smells to someone standing in it tonight. But someone will still be carrying a bag through dark streets to a house where a woman needs help. The bag will be different, lighter, different materials, the knife replaced by instruments designed by a century of refinement. The eagle stone gone, the prayer girdle gone, replaced by things with different names and the same purpose. The herbs will be replaced by pharmaceuticals synthesized in laboratories from compounds that were once herbs, and that work the same way for reasons now understood. The bone button will be replaced by equipment that measures oxygen in blood with a number on a screen. But the person carrying the bag will still be washing their hands before they start. Still talking to the labouring woman in the specific tone that says, "I'm here. I know what I'm doing. I've done this before." Still applying counter pressure in the right place on a lower back in the right way at the right moment. Still watching for the shoulder. Still making the 2-second decision. Still holding something they can't fully explain in their left hand when the right hand knows what to do and the rest of you needs to believe it. Some things don't change. The human body doesn't change. The work doesn't change. The chain doesn't break. Let sleep come. Let it come the way it came for Agnes in the attic room, in the morning light, with the birds singing and the bells marking the hour and the city going on without her for a little while. Let the sounds of your own world, whatever they are, wherever you are, whatever city or room or particular quiet or particular noise surrounds you, let them become part of the air rather than things being listened to. Let your hands lie still. They've done enough today. Let your breathing do what it does without any supervision from you. Let the weight of the day settle into the mattress, into the pillow, into the specific horizontal piece of a body that has been vertical for too long and is finally allowed to stop. You are warm enough, rested enough, safe enough. There is a bag somewhere in your life, whatever your bag is. The thing you carry that contains everything you know, everything you've been taught, everything you've learned from watching and doing, and occasionally failing and trying again. Everyone has one. You've carried it today. You can put it down. Tomorrow it will be there when you need it. Everything in its place. The contents arranged by someone who thought about them carefully, who learned from someone who learned from someone in a chain of knowledge that goes further back than you can trace. Tomorrow there will be work. There always is. But that's tomorrow. Right now there's just this. The weight of your limbs against the surface beneath you. The sound of your own breathing. Slower now. The ordinary extraordinary fact of being alive and warm and at rest. The quiet accumulation of seconds that are not required to be anything except themselves. Let sleep take you, the way it took Agnes Crowthorpe in her attic room in York in the spring of 1523, at the end of a night that ended well. Let the world fade. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop asking anything of you. You've earned this rest. Take it. Good night.